Tupac kind of falls into my left arm.
A music icon killed in our streets.
I'm asking what happened, who shot you?
Fox 5 News investigates theories of revenge, corruption, and rap's most powerful.
It leads back to
Who Killed Tupac? Thursday on Fox 5 News at 10.
Jail and all of that is for fighting and stuff like that is for jail and all of that. But I don't. I have never been the type of guy that go and put any type of work. Will never get no car and do nothing. I'm a reactor. I'm one that with you and that's going to react to things that happens. But yeah, I don't believe in being spontaneous at all. And so that's what I mean when I say I will orchestrate something. You know, if I want somebody to get slapped or something like that, we're going to put a plan together. You'll never get me being emotional like a bitch and spontaneous and taking penitentiary chances. No. You probably can slap me. And I always said, you slap me, you might get away with slapping me right then. But trust me, you're going to pay for that slap one day. And that's what I mean by that. So, yeah.
Now we need to check out another part of Michael Carlin's theory. Reggie Wright Jr. and the allegedly dirty cops who he and Suge Knight was bringing into the inner circle of death row.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
We got a lot to cover up.
Well, who do you think killed Tupac?
I believe Orlando Anderson killed Tupac.
Are Sharitha and Reggie Wright Jr. telling the truth? Michael Carlin doesn't think so.
Reggie Wright Jr., the head of security for Right Way Security and Death Row, organized the personnel to plan the hit, and I believe police officers were a big part of the hit.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
We got a lot to cover up.
So guys,
What's going on?
Greg Kading is out. His lawyer won't let him do it, so
we've been waiting around for Kading all day, and
and now
he's not
he's a
coming.
no-show.
Really, I wanted to talk to him because there's so much to ask him.
Yeah.
Today is the anniversary of the murder of Christopher Wallace at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. And I wanted to go through another statement that was made by Kevin Hackie. And there's salient information in that statement. And this was made under penalty of perjury on June the 6th of 2004. Now, LAPD is told that David Kenner gave Donald Ray the money to defend Mac in 2000, and that was when he was charged in a bank robbery. Now, why is that important? Well, Donald Ray had previously represented Suge Knight, and David Kenner giving the money to defend David Mack is important too, and David Kenner's still in the news. He just gets disqualified in Suge Knight's case. He's been asked to be relieved. I guess he wasn't disqualified, but some kind of a falling out happened between him and Suge Knight, and it always seems to be the same cast of characters over and over again. And Suge Knight was just denied an important hearing, and David Kenner represented him. And David Kenner was the one that enters the MGM footage into the probation violation hearing on Suge Knight. Now, why would you do that? Well, because you want to send him away. You want to get rid of him. You want to get him out of there. So in this Kevin Hackie statement made on June 6, 2004 in the Wallace Civil Trial. Kevin Hackie also talks about how Chuck Phillips is frequently at death row functions, and he received lots of payments from death row records. And in the murder of Buntry, it's Chuck Phillips that alters the timeline in that murder. And that gives Reggie Sr. enough time to have his alibi padded by being home at the time that he's called by Cecil Rambo. Number 25 in this report, it says, based upon the knowledge I obtained in my position with Death Row Records, David Mack was involved in the murder of Christopher Wallace. It's further my understanding David Mack's involvement in the murder of Christopher Wallace was directly a result of his color of authority as a police officer and his access to sensitive police information. Now, that becomes a problem for LAPD and the city of Los Angeles. And not just a problem. That becomes 4 billion problems, because you have $1 billion in lifetime earnings that Biggie Smalls would have made, and triple damages, which punitives are not always limited to just triple, but triple is an oftentimes award, triple punitive damages. And that would mean $4 billion to the city of Los Angeles. And if they're tied to the Tupac murder, that's another $4 billion problem for the city of Los Angeles and LAPD. And we know Kevin Gaines was in Vegas 2 days before the murder till 2 days after Tupac dies on official assignment in Las Vegas. So Kevin Hackie issues this statement, and he's wanting to let it be known that he did everything he could to cooperate with LAPD. Fred Miller says, hey, we're not going to let you solve the biggest murder. So they don't want Kevin Hackie's information. And we see that over and over, right, with these police agencies. They don't want the confession letter in 1998. Chris Blatchford reaches out to them, tries to give it to them. They have no interest in it. In 2014, when the confession letter is given to me by journalist Chris Blatchford, they have no interest in it. In 2015, when I talked to Dan Long, all he wants to know about is the gun. What about the gun? What about the gun? How do I get my hands on the gun? Because he's not really there to investigate. He doesn't want the confession letter. He doesn't want to investigate the claims in the confession letter. He just wants the guns so that they can cover this shit up. And that's what we see with the law enforcement agencies, because it's simply too expensive for them to actually solve the crimes, especially if it leads back to LAPD under color of authority, using sensitive information. So 2 days after the murder of Christopher Wallace in number 23, I was approached by an interview by investigators for the Los Angeles Police Department. They informed me that numerous confidential informants led them to me and said I would be the best one to give information concerning the murder. I informed them that I had personal knowledge regarding the murder of Christopher Wallace and would provide this information to them. I told them I had personal knowledge that persons within Death Row Records offered $25,000 to a law enforcement officer to have Christopher Wallace murdered. This offer was made to a law enforcement officer because his position in law enforcement would facilitate the murder. That's a pretty damning statement. And previous, in number 21, he says, David Mack was in the position as a result of the color of his authority as a Los Angeles police officer and had access to information and communications at that position entailed. So the other thing, there's a talk of a meeting that happens And Reggie Wright Jr. is said to have, at that meeting, said, "We're going to get the motherfuckers that downed Pac." And that makes him an official suspect in this murder. But it's not just that makes him an official suspect. He's an official suspect all over the paperwork in the Wallace Civil Trial and the investigative documents. And that's who Las Vegas uses as their star witness to go after Keefe-D. They use Reggie Wright Jr. as their star witness. He is the predicate upon which Keefe-D is charged in that murder. And Reggie Wright Jr. says it all the time. He doesn't care about being a suspect in the Biggie murder. He's happy to have been a suspect in the Biggie murder. Number 19, during my association with Death Row Records, I had occasion to observe Los Angeles police officer Kevin Gaines at numerous Death Row Records functions. The Los Angeles Police Department had contact with Officer Kevin Gaines, and it was well known Officer Gaines was associated with Death Row Records. I know this because LAPD Internal Affairs was undertaking an investigation of Gaines in about September of 1995 or January of 1996. At this time, Officer Gaines was regularly coming to work with a new BMW and Mercedes, and in fact, one of those cars had a personalized license plate, "It's okay, IA," referring to LAPD Internal Affairs. So Kevin Hackie is talking about this, and it is highly likely that "it's okay," and then space, IA, might mean that it's okay, Kevin Gaines is IA. Because let's not forget, Perez, Mack, and Gaines are all personally selected to be LAPD officers by Police Chief Bernard Parks. So I'm going to read you number 18 now. During my association with Death Row Records, I had occasion to observe Los Angeles police officer David Mack at numerous Death Row Records functions that were reserved for close associates of Death Row Records. I personally observed David Mack to be present at the Death Row Records Christmas party. I personally observed David Mack and Rafael Perez to be present and in the company of Death Row Records associates in the city of Las Vegas, Nevada, in May or June of 1996. And in May or June, what do we hear? We hear that all of the Compton PD are working off-duty security at the MGM. And Kevin Hackie continues, they were present at both a Mike Tyson boxing match as well as a nightclub owned by Death Row Records CEO Suge Knight. I personally observed David Mack at an MTV event called Toss It Up in the company of Death Row Records Associates. I personally observed David Mack in the company of Death Row Records Associates at the Black Image Awards in 1995. And it continues. You guys can read it all. And the one thing I would say to you, too, is that supposedly a meeting at a strip club happens. $25,000 is offered to kill Christopher Wallace. Reggie is supposedly at that meeting. And the thing about that meeting is that it happens in November of 1996. And what do we know about November of 1996? By then, Suge Knight is at LA County Jail for his probation violation. And my understanding from talking to a man who was in jail with him at the LA County Jail is that he was dealt dirty when he was in jail. He was shackled hand and foot. No possible way he could have had access to a cell phone. His communications were limited. So is it possible that Suge Knight could ever be charged with the murder of Christopher Wallace? Not likely. Not likely that he could be charged. Not likely that he was participating in any way in that meeting where the hit is ordered and not likely that he was involved in any way on March the 9th of 1997 when Christopher Wallace is gunned down at the Peterson Automotive Museum. Now, he gets blamed for this all the time, but it's not likely he had anything to do with the death of Christopher Wallace. And when you look at the death of Tupac, if you believe he died from his injuries in the car, why would Suge Knight sit in the car next to Tupac when shots ring out? I mean, that doesn't make any sense either. And we know that when Frank Alexander was called away from the hospital and Tupac took a turn and passed away, the call came in and Suge Knight threw the phone down and busted the glass table because he was so pissed off that Tupac was dead. So number 15, Hackie says, while I do not know many of the specific names of the Los Angeles police officers involved, I do recall an LAPD officer named Love, who I believe his first name was David. Of course, LAPD officer Kevin Gaines was working death row security at the time, and LAPD officers Rafael Perez and David Mack were commonplace fixtures at death row functions and activities. The involvement of police officers with death row records and its affiliated gangs, including Los Angeles police officers as well as known to the Los Angeles Police Department as well as other law enforcement agencies, although normally police officers associate with one another in group settings, this general rule was not followed at death row records. So, number 14, death row records and its affiliated street gangs used off-duty law enforcement officers, including multiple Los Angeles police officers, to act as security personnel. Specifically, the involved affiliated street gangs were the Bloods and Crips. Very few of these officers were actual employees of death row records, which Sharitha tells us that those cops were never employed at death row records. And Hackie continues, rather, these officers acted in the capacity of informal agents serving as information sources and lookouts. So, number 13, during my tenure with death row records, I became aware of the narcotics trade associated with death row records. This, in part, was the reason I was acting as an informant for the FBI. While I did not personally observe drug trafficking transactions, I did provide the FBI valuable information relating to the investigation in regard, including information, photographs, dates, times, and firearms. So, Hackie, says quite a few other things in here, and I'm going to read you the part about Reggie Wright Jr. Number 9, on September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur was murdered in Las Vegas, Nevada. Death row records and persons associated with death row records blamed Bad Boy Entertainment and Christopher Wallace specifically for the murder. Statements were made by multiple persons that Christopher Wallace and Bad Boy Entertainment should be made to pay for the death of Tupac Shakur. As an example, in or about September of 1996, I was with Reggie Wright at the Can-Am Studios in Tarzana. At this time, Reggie said, we are going to get the motherfuckers who downed Tupac Shakur, motherfucking Biggie and his crew. And so there you have it. That shows that Reggie wanted to get retaliation. He was spreading the whole East Coast, West Coast theme. And interesting enough, when I tried to track it down, Reggie was running around Club 662 talking about how Orlando Anderson was the shooter of Tupac and Suge. But I also just wanted to put this out there. I tracked it down. The very first person that I could find that was talking about Orlando Anderson being the shooter in Tupac and Suge's attempted assassination that night was, believe it or not, David Kenner, and that comes from Malik's book, which you guys can all take a look at. So I'm going to release this document. It's going to be relevant, I think, to impeach the testimony of Reggie Wright Jr. in the Keefe-D thing. And Keefe-D is now saying it. Police were the ones that told him what to say. They coached him. They coerced him. They did everything to get him to say these things. And then he released a book. And when you guys get a chance, take a look at this book. It doesn't look like a book as much as it does a deposition. If you look at the index, you look at the table of contents, all that stuff, it looks more like a deposition. And so this book was crafted to be used in a law case. And this was part of the cover-up of Keefe-D being named as the murderer of Tupac. They planned this out. The police told him what to say. They put it into a book that he didn't write because he doesn't talk the way the book is written. And it looks like a deposition. This book looks like a deposition. It was a plan for this to get entered into evidence at some point, and we are seeing the cover-up plan unfold right now. If you've been following this story, you may be familiar with parts of it, and I'm not sure that you've ever had somebody explain the whole thing in one video, but I'd like to try today to explain it to you. Our story really begins with Snoop, who was caught up in a murder case, and it's the murder of Philip Waldemariam. Now, that murder goes to trial, but the first thing that happens when that murder happens is they call Suge Knight. Suge Knight calls David Kenner. The car goes missing. The guns go missing. They say the car's stolen. It turns up completely clean, swept, whatnot. Guns are now missing. But they do have shell casings. They do have bullets. That stuff is being kept at Pacific Division at LAPD. And so there's a effort to discredit the witnesses. There's an effort to intimidate the witnesses. The intimidation happens, and it's done by Compton PD working in conjunction with LAPD. They're showing up, and they are intimidating the witnesses. There's a woman who says she saw a gun in Snoop's hands, and Malik in the middle of the night goes to the warden and says he saw a gun in Snoop's hands, and he confesses. That gets suppressed at trial. The other thing that happens is the evidence that is sitting in the Pacific Division evidence locker goes missing. And that evidence was key in showing that there were two guns, because it was shell casings and bloody clothing. And it's stolen out of the evidence locker. How easy is it to steal evidence out of an evidence locker? Well, back then it was probably a little bit easier, but it's not so easy. It's inside of a police operation. So they enlist the help of the Rampart Scandal Police. And these are thieves. David Mack gets convicted for armed robbery at a bank, Bank of America, in near campus at USC. And he gets away with $726,000, gets to keep the money, doesn't have to give up his accomplices, does a percentage of his time, and he's out and gets to keep the money, doesn't have to turn it over. Rafael Perez, convicted of stealing evidence out of the evidence locker. So the thieves have been let into death row records. And Reggie Wright Jr., Compton PD, Reggie Wright Sr., Compton PD, they're also somehow involved in all that. DAs are leaking details in the case. The civil trial gets moved up. Snoop gets acquitted. In the civil trial, they had to disclose who the witnesses were. And once they disclose who the witnesses are, those witnesses are no longer available at trial. Snoop gets acquitted. But Snoop only gets acquitted on some of the murder counts. And one of the murder counts is a hung jury, and so they decide not to re-prosecute that. But even to this day, they could re-prosecute Snoop. So they've got something to hang over Snoop's head. Because that is murder. There is no statute of limitations on murder. So Snoop's going to pretty much do whatever it is they want him to do. And that's kind of how this group rolls. It rolls with extortion, intimidation. It rolls with drug trafficking out the back door, music out the front door. What do you need the music for? You need the music as the legit money. What do you need the drugs for? You got to do the payola. You got to pay off to get studio time. You got to pay off to get a record played. You got to get it pressed. You got to get it shelf space. And so that's all stuff that happens and has been happening in the record industry since the 40s. Suge didn't invent that game. He was just really good at it. And they had a machine together where they had drugs going out the back door and they had music going out the front door. And that's kind of how Death Row Records was rolling at the time. So Snoop gets off. No problem, right? Snoop's back. He's doing music. Tupac himself, he was made famous by Dan Quayle. Dan Quayle makes Tupac famous. He's at the pulpit and he says there's no place in our society for Tupac Shakur or his music or his lyrics. And that compels him to, or propels him to superstardom. And so Tupac is now an icon. And then in Atlanta, Tupac stumbles upon a young man getting beaten by two men, and he shoots them, and they turn out to be off-duty police officers. And he shoots them both in the ass. He gets arrested for it. Turns out they were drunk and disorderly, and they also had guns that were stolen out of the evidence locker. And so Tupac actually gets off, charges dismissed. And when he gets away with shooting two off-duty police officers, now he is propelled to superstardom. And they hem him up in a rape case because they got to get him off the streets. The cops don't like him. They manufacture this whole thing with Haitian Jack and all that. Haitian Jack's an informant. Catches this case, gets convicted, goes to prison, Dannemora. Visited by Suge. You got the people that are at Interscope asking Suge to take Tupac off their hands, and they confuse all the accounting. Tupac can't get his money. He goes on to Death Row Records, gets out of prison, starts laying down tracks. November of 95, the Gary Webb articles come out. The CIA is putting drugs out on the streets of America. And that sends shockwaves through the music industry because the drug trafficking, money laundering operation at Death Row Records, it's got to go. So Suge and Tupac are green-lit because this record label now, in its heyday, it's got to be shut down. It's been green-lit to be shut down and eliminated from the scene. There's still a catalog. There's money in the catalog. But clearly they can't run the drugs out the back door and the records out the front door anymore. And so they got to switch their suppliers. They got to switch. They're not going to get rid of a revenue stream, but they are going to make adjustments to how things work. So it rolls down to Vegas. You got Reggie Wright Jr., who, according to the confession letter, goes to a meeting with a gang summit where there's supposedly peace talks going on, but it's not peace talks. It's talking about how much would it cost to get rid of Suge and Tupac. And that's what's in the confession letter. That gets buried into a file in 1998. Chris Blatchford tries to give it to Vegas. They don't want it. He tries to give it to LAPD. They don't want it. There's no interest in the confession letter. He puts it in his file. And that letter doesn't come out until a meeting with Russell Poole in 2013 and a meeting with me in 2014. And the letter is given to me by journalist Chris Blatchford. And that letter is what propelled the Russell Michael Carlin investigation. And we originally did it with somebody else, and there were just a parting of the ways, let's say. And we'll just leave it at that. And that's not really a relevant part of the story. It doesn't matter. But the one thing that you can say is that anybody that has affiliations with the police tried to always steer this investigation away from the police. They tried to steer it away from the thieves that stole the evidence out of the evidence locker. Rafael Perez, David Mack, Kevin Gaines, Sharitha Knight, who, they're mentioned in all this stuff as forces inside of Death Row Records trying to topple Suge and take over the record label. And there's already a move afoot from a much higher level trying to get rid of Suge because he's become a problem. He's a bully. He's a little bit too showy. And there's a lot of heat on the drug industry because you got the CIA coming out and having town halls saying that they have nothing to do with the drug trade. You have Michael Rupert come out and say he's seen the CIA agents out there. You got the Vikings saying that they're tired of having their loads hijacked by the CIA. And so you got this turmoil that's going on in the drug industry at the time Tupac and Suge are targeted. So the school play happens, and anybody who denies what's seen on the MGM as being a school play against Tupac and against Orlando Anderson, who is there standing there waiting to take a beatdown that he was most likely paid to take. And you have Orlando Anderson that was supposedly shot by Compton PD, or that's supposedly shot at Compton PD. So they hate this guy. They're going to set him up. And they do. They set him up. He's at the MGM. He's waiting there. There's the whisper into Tupac's ear. Tupac takes off. A little bit of a fight happens. It's a little bit of a beatdown. But Orlando Anderson has a dislocated shoulder. That is one of those trick shoulders that happened previous to this. And it gets re-injured in that little scuff-up. And it's, 10 or 15 seconds of somebody pounding on you, a bunch of people pounding on you in a beatdown. That could do a lot of damage. He's standing there at the MGM. He walks away with Reggie Wright Jr. You see Reggie Wright Sr. there on the video. He's got a very definitive mark on the back of his neck. It's very identifiable. And you see all the characters that we constantly see in this school play. Now, if you're Reggie Wright Jr., and you were supposed to keep Suge Knight and Tupac safe, you fucked up. And if you're Reggie Wright Jr. and you were meant to kill Suge Knight and Tupac that night, you fucked up. They're not dead. They're both expected to live. Tupac's expected to live. What lawyer would allow a doctor to come out, especially with a high-profile celebrity, and announce that Tupac is supposed to survive? That never happens. It's rare that anybody makes an announcement like that. They must have had a reasonable expectation that Tupac was going to live. They were actually planning to have physical therapy for Tupac in Arizona. They were making arrangements for him to go to physical therapy. So they thoroughly expected Tupac was going to live. And one thing we know about Tupac, he was not going to wake up and be silent about who had shot him. And so there's a real problem if Tupac survives. There's a real problem that Suge survived. The evidence of the MGM beating gets entered into evidence in Suge's case for his probation violation by David Kenner. Now, wait a minute. Why does David Kenner enter that into evidence? It's because he wants to send Suge Knight away to prison so he can steal the wealth of Death Row Records. And Tupac Shakur, he's got to go. And in this time between Tupac and Suge expected to live, you can imagine the panic that's going on inside right-way security. You could imagine the higher-up saying, you're a fuck-up. You're supposed to keep him alive? You're a fuck-up. You're supposed to kill him? You're a fuck-up. Either way, they look at Reggie as the fuck-up. And Reggie is trying to blame Frank Alexander. Frank didn't have his gun. And he tells Frank Alexander not to tell Suge. Why does he tell him not to tell Suge? Well, so 4 days later, they have to prove that they can carry out a hit. And here they are. They block off the street on Mayo. You know where Bobby Finch is going to be because he's waiting for his workout partner. And you got intel about his workout partner. And there he is sitting there in the car. A blue car pulls up, probably a Honda, talks to Bobby Finch for 3 or 4 minutes. And then they open fire on Bobby Finch.
The Compton killings that occurred thereafter after Tupac was shot was just a diversion to make, general public, law enforcement believe it was a blood crip thing. When indeed, it was all orchestrated.
Tupac kind of falls into my left arm.
A music icon killed in our streets.
I'm asking what happened, who shot you?
Fox 5 News investigates theories of revenge, corruption, and rap's most powerful.
It leads back to
Who Killed Tupac? Thursday on Fox 5 News at 10.
About 2 weeks after that, I was contacted by Reggie to go over to Santa Monica Police Department to pick up this firearm.
Hackie says he first showed the handgun to his FBI handlers and then turned it over to Reggie Wright Jr. A month later in Las Vegas, investigators say it was a .40 Glock handgun that killed Tupac Shakur. Hackie believes the murder weapon was the same gun he gave Reggie Wright Jr.
I believe it is.
And we spoke to 2 head investigators on Tupac's murder. Here are their theories of the event.
I won't deny it, I'm a straight ride.
September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur, along with his associates from Death Row Records, are leaving a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Hotel and Casino when they see Orlando Anderson, a known Southside Crip from Los Angeles. In this video from inside the MGM, Shakur, along with Suge Knight, can be seen kicking and stomping Anderson.
Just after 11 p.m., Tupac, Suge Knight, and the rest of their entourage of about 6 cars were headed to a club. They were stopped here at the intersection of Koval and Flamingo. A white Cadillac pulled up alongside Knight's BMW and opened fire.
Shakur was sitting in the passenger side and was hit multiple times. This is the last photo taken of Shakur the night of the shooting. He died 5 days later at UMC at the age of 25. 6 months later in Los Angeles, East Coast rapper Christopher Wallace, otherwise known as Notorious B.I.G., is gunned down leaving a party. LAPD detective Russell Poole is assigned the case and found the murder of Shakur and Wallace were connected.
Russell Poole was investigating this crime, and it kept leading to off-duty police officers. And he kept being told by management at the LA, hey, stop, you're investigating.
Poole was eventually taken off the case. He quit the force and sued the LAPD. Author Michael Carlin helped Poole publish multiple books about his findings.
I'm just calling to tell you look over your shoulder.
And says Poole never stopped working on the murders.
Dave Demersion is the senior ADA at the district attorney's office. We started having these meetings, and Dave was like, I'm still just not interested, not feeling this case. We doubled our efforts. We came up with 45 Tupac murder facts. We handed that to him, and finally he said, I am very interested in this case now.
In September 2015, 19 years after Shakur's murder, Poole scores a meeting with investigators.
A man takes 2 billion heartbeats, and the last 2,000 of his heartbeats are in a meeting with the sheriffs talking about sheriff corruption, and he passes away in the meeting. I mean, it defies logic.
Carlin says Poole had uncovered evidence that those inside Death Row Records planned to kill Suge Knight to take over the label. Shakur was also a target because, according to Poole, he was planning to leave the label and take hundreds of unreleased songs with him. FBI documents and former LAPD officers confirmed Death Row Records employed multiple officers who worked security.
The motive is Death Row Records. Death Row Records was worth $500 million. And the reality is, cops were involved in the murder of Tupac. The reason this hasn't been solved is because it leads back to cops.
Fox 5 tried to contact the former Compton police officer who took over Death Row Records after the murder. He did not respond.
Profile unsolved cases
Right here in Las Vegas. Exactly.
Incredible. Great work, Cindy.
Thank you.
Several informants told investigators the white Cadillac used in the shooting of Tupac was rented. However, police were never able to track down the car. We also reached out to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. They told us they couldn't comment because the investigation into the death of Tupac Shakur is still ongoing. Greg Kading, the LAPD officer we spoke to for this piece, has published a book and has a documentary about his findings. He was taken off the investigation after an internal review found him guilty of altering witness statements. We also talked to Tupac Shakur's cousin. He originally agreed to be part of Cindy Lundenberg's investigation, then told us the family decided against it.
What up, Ball First family? How y'all doing? Hey, John, you got a lot to cover up, y'all.
We got a lot to cover up.
Puffy was going up the stairs, and he said, I don't care if Tupac died, I don't care if Biggie gotta die, and I don't care if Suge gotta go to prison for the rest of his life.
We gotta have a confession letter on how everything went down and who's responsible.
Now, getting back to Russell was following in the footsteps of his dad, and he was able to work through the LAPD and have all the things that had to be done within the LAPD. He certainly knew the streets very well. And circumstances in his case were far more tragic because he was killed in the line of duty.
Hold your head on repeat. Listen to the beat. Again and again in my playpen till Tupac appeared to me. Finally I see. How do we keep the music playing with these devils betraying? Rap games ghost, hocus pocus flows, exposing my foes and their John Does. Mad respect, Russell Poole detect, murders checked. Now rest your head, bless the dead while the message spreads. Machiavelli said, my killers have not yet bled.
They gotta be sorry for what they did.
Like I said, I had two of the toughest guys for him. And Reggie pulled them off of me. It didn't have to happen. I told him to send 5 guys from the club to there, and they never sent nobody.
Suge was set up.
I'm like, cuz, you going to Vegas? You going to Vegas, cuz? They finna try to do something to me.
I mean, murder is pretty simple. The first person you go after is the spouse.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Reggie was good friends, and Perez and Sharita and Reggie is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot.
Why would I want a paper trail when I never brought him around nowhere? So if I'm gonna hide him in secret, you think I'm gonna let somebody catch a paper trail? They were paid cash by Snoop.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
It was a murder for hire hit.
If it was an actual shooting in Vegas, it's on camera in Vegas.
It's witnesses that said they gave no sex to kill me. So I knew it was cameras everywhere in Vegas because I went to UNLV.
All of the corners in Vegas was equipped with cameras.
Those guys, if you go back and watch the film, they was already stalking Pac, watching him. So that just tipped the iceberg when something happened. But there was a plan already to do something to him.
How come Reggie is Suge's bodyguard and he wasn't with Suge?
We went to Las Vegas Metro in '97. After Biggie was killed, I think there's got to be a connection between the two. The politicians said they don't want to solve it, so they told the investigators, put it up on the shelf.
I'm quite sure if they saw the first one, they would saw the second one because it's the same circle of people.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? He was actually a good kid, too, you know?
Trickery, witchery, foolery, flop. Plot to take out Suge and Pac. Traffic stop starts the clock. Collusion of industry, street and cop. Filmmaker takes one last shot. 60 seconds after, no more laughter. Half dead whips out Fatal's Glock. Pop, pop, pop. Pop, pop, pop. Quite the head turner, they's dad came over Nate's burner. Got him on Porky Squawker, surviving a real shocker. Fat ass said, we got a lot to cover up, y'all, and that's what's up. Stripped to straps, unloaded gats, Buntry shot back. 3 men in the caddy, just smoked a fatty, but it wasn't Sugar Daddy.
Supposedly there's a hit on Suge.
Wounds are life-threatening, but serious, not in critical condition at this time. And the person, as you are already aware, who was the passenger in this vehicle, is a known rap performer by the name of Tupac Shakur.
With Tupac, I still got a 45 bullet into my skull.
We've been informed that doctors have told the family members that they expect the rap star to once again recover from his injuries.
They know who was going on behind all that stuff, you know? How much would it cost to get rid of Suge? They said, what you mean by get rid of him? He said, kill him.
They put a hit on Suge.
Reggie's dad told me that. Well, he said, Michael, if anything happened to Suge, this is what he told me. Anything happened to Suge, Reggie would run the majority of the company.
It's the same people, same circle of people. It have nothing to do with me, you know?
Treat it on the paper. Yeah, Reggie would carry most of the burden.
It come from because they want the ownership of my company.
Hey, John, you got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Doctor said Pac's on the mend.
We tried to form some security detail, at least around the floor, around his room, because they had him on the first floor.
Surrounded by friends. Foes called in to make kin spin, finish him off.
We were pissed off. I'm like, this is an assassination attempt, right? And y'all got him on the first floor near a window.
Pac shook the bed, for his life he pled.
By the time I got there, remember I was coming from LA. So by the time I got there, he had tubes in his throat, in his nose, in his mouth. So he ain't talk to me, not verbally. He was conscious. He was trying to talk. He did want to talk, but he didn't actually verbalize any words. Always, that's going to be one of the biggest mysteries in my life, because he was trying to tell me something. He was trying so hard. He was shaking the bed. He was looking at me, with his big old eyes, and I know he was trying to tell me something, but I don't know.
IVs to the vein go straight to the brain. Poison would ease his pain. It only took a drop to make his heart stop. D.O.G. Scorsese created the distraction. Lulled protectors in action for the final transaction.
The head of gangs and homicide from the Compton PD
is Reggie Wright Sr. And the head of security at Death Row is Reggie Wright Jr.
The vice president on TV talking about taking my record off the shelves. Police, you know, every time they see me, they think I'm a cop killer.
It was an assassination attempt on Suge in Las Vegas, who would have everything to gain.
I could have jumped out on his ass in Vegas, but it was killing me. But Snoop was like, hold on, don't fuck this up. So
I was told it was an operation. It was a planned assassination.
How come Reggie is Suge's bodyguard and he wasn't with Suge?
He wanted to be Suge Knight so bad.
Where stuff really come from, it come from because they weren't the ownership of my company.
Police did not follow up on the most basic lead.
Just happened to have officers in the spot at the right time, were able to radio ahead.
The cops that they trying to connect to Death Row were never hired on Death Row.
He had no relationship with any police officers.
When I got shot, it was 37 cameras.
All the artists at Death Row was willing to come with me.
There's other rappers who wanted Suge taken out.
I'm scared of no one.
My pitch was to the record labels and to the company was to have police officers that could be good witnesses and for the inmates.
You crooked ass cop.
I didn't need to take from niggas. I was institutionalized motherfucker. If I tell threatened by anybody, you want to know the real. Nigga would have went to jail for a long time fucking with me.
Get everything you deserve.
Perez and Sarita and Reg is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot.
You always will tell you, those are Reggie people.
Suge didn't let none of my security ride with me, because I feel like they finna try to do something to me.
Some guys, they need some ex-cops to work off duty for
Police corruption cannot exist. Cannot exist unless it is condoned and tolerated by upper police management.
Greg Kading is out. His lawyer won't let him do it.
You crooked ass cop.
Could it be that the police department had something to do with Tupac's murder?
Coroner's hearse, idols nearby, a dear mama goodbye. Rushed autopsy, quick cremation, police celebrations. Enemies snicker, Haitian bootlicker. We the people mourn, hearts are torn. Bulk of the nation, radio stations, next generations.
And that's what happened. Our lives was in jeopardy.
Told you in the hospital there, something wasn't right.
Situation was, me and Pac had a little falling out a day or two before that in New York.
Now, you don't take no ass whipping like that unless something's up. Unless the goose is cooked.
Orlando wasn't even a shooter, He was actually a good kid, too,
Now, Orlando Anderson, here he is, the only Southside Crip standing in a casino. He was planetary.
Wow, the last time I saw him, he was laying in the bed, holding on to his last breath.
Yeah, John, we got a lot to cover up.
Sold cops throw shade and blame, fill the frame. Orlando's a throwaway patsy, denies the murder flatly. It's a cover-up, a chaos merchant's cover-up. Can't stop the truth from bubbling up. This shit's a cover-up.
Nobody cared about Pac having the right amount of security at all, period.
No one cared.
It was not mentioned at all.
No one cared. And every time I ask Reggie, he gets really defensive. Told you in the hospital there, something wasn't right.
Interfering with the Vegas case. He's a lieutenant in Compton, LAPD, whatever. Interfering with the Vegas case.
Jimmy is close personal friends with Reggie Wright Sr.
Because Pop, that weekend before he went, was talking about pulling away from the labels and starting their own.
What me and Biggie want to do is take control of distribution of rap music. I said, oh boy, do you know what you're going up against? Do you understand the organized criminal networks you're going up against and the two major ethnic groups that run it? He said, yeah, we do. I said, well, you and Biggie can't do no shit like this. He said, we're not alone. We are organizing other young rappers.
And let's go and try to be a distributor on our own. At that time, it was 6 majors, and he was trying to be number 7. I remember he was talking about calling it Lucky 7.
Said, if you control distribution, you can let them have their labels, you can give them anything else they want, but control distribution. From there, you control the industry.
And we don't want that, man. It's enough brothers out here dying already.
Yeah, John, y'all got a lot to cover up. Y'all motherfuckers got Pac. Do y'all know how much that hurts our hearts?
Quail made you famous, your voice made you dangerous. Victim of jealousy, pour out your Hennessy. Death is calling me.
In seconds, Biggie Smalls was dead, shot like Tupac in the passenger seat. According to the police, no random event, but a well-executed hit by a still unknown assailant.
What's the hate for Reg for? Oh, cause you killed Biggie? Well, if I did, wouldn't it make you supposed to love me even more if you love Tupac?
Anybody that ever put their hands on me, I'll tell you, might not get you that day, but you're gonna get got.